My speech is going to deal with the first two out of the 3 points that he made. Organizing your speech. Drank 3 cups of coffee because I thought I was going to only have 5 minutes to get this in, so I'm going to have to constantly try to slow down my speaking a little bit too, to go 7. How many here have ever taken a few hundred dominoes, set them up in a pattern, and then watched as you knocked over the first one, and it beautifully wove a vine right up through tunnels and everything else, and you saw the last one go down? That's a well-organized speech. Momentum, direction, conclusion. What happens when we don't organize our speeches? We tip that first one, and it goes about 10, and then one was out of the way, it was too far, and then we're trying to do another one, and here, boom, boom. A lot of times we don't even get to our conclusion. That's a very, very poorly organized. We've lost our momentum, we have no direction. I maintain that a well-organized speech, poorly delivered, is better than a poorly organized speech, well delivered. We see that all the time with politicians. I have a few tips on how I go about organizing a speech. And if you follow these, I guarantee it, you'll win the competition every time. First of all, you set up an outline. The purpose of the speech. The purpose of the speech is really important, because a speech without a purpose is just a lot of hot air. You also want to set the bar at the right level for the purpose. If you set your goal too high, what will happen is a speech that doesn't attain its goal actually ends up falling flat on its face. For instance, if I came in here and I said, my goal is to convince every liberal member of Toastmasters in here that all their ideology is poppycock, I'm setting it too high. There's no way I'm going to do that. However, if I sow the seed of doubt to convert a couple in the fallacy possibly of global warming, then maybe that's attainable. So you have to set your goal at an attainable goal. That's the purpose of your speech. Target audience. Ken touched on this. Are you speaking to first graders, or are you speaking to a room full of distinguished Toastmasters? Very important. Length of the speech. Now this, a lot of times in a competition, this is already set. But you still have to acknowledge and set that. That's the parameters that you're going to try to fit this idea that you've taken, and now you're trying to make it into a cognitive presentation in front of a lot of people. So the length of the speech, if it's a little warm-up speech in front of some other speaker, it might only be 3 minutes. But if it's the keynote speaker at a graduation, it could be 20 or 30 minutes. So it's very important to know what the length of your speech is as you build it. The type of the speech. Is it humorous? Is it educational? Is it inspirational? This is very important in setting up the way you're taking that idea and making it into a speech. Now, as a planning commissioner for several years, we had what was known as the city general plan. This is our general plan for speakers. We call it the framework. Every speech has an opening, a body, and a conclusion. It seems very simple, but every automobile has a chassis, a body, and a motor. It's important as you're building your speech, organizing your speech, that you put the different components in each one. Usually the body will be the biggest part, but there are speeches or times when you make a longer opening or a longer conclusion. This is what I call my ingredients. Making a speech, organizing a speech is like baking a cake. We have all those ingredients. Now it's very important that you put the right ingredients into your speech, and you put them in the right amount and in the right sequence. Examples, stories, quotes, humor, equations, or other proofs. All of these are spices or ingredients that you can add to your speech. Some speeches will have almost all of these, but most will have a few. So you have to identify. This is the portion of the organization of your speech that is going to be the most work. It's going to take the longest time, because you're actually building, you're putting the meat on the bones. The framework is a skeleton. This is the meat. This is the meat of the speech. For instance, as an example, you're putting these in at different spots. My last speech, in my opening, I started with a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So there is no set rules on which goes where.
And the back side.
Okay. Fine tuning, or what I call the white glove stage. When they build a brand new motor home, if it's a really high dollar one, they go over it with white gloves before it's ever delivered to the new owner. You want to do the same thing with your speech. Refine the elements and smooth transitions. A lot of times, a lot of speeches have 3 examples. If you're going from, hey, what about those Dodgers? Yo, you like that? No, you've got to make a transition. You can't keep your audience going and bouncing all around. So a lot of times just putting in a small humorous connector between those 2 examples really helps your speech along. Evaluate each word and phrase. Get your thesaurus out and say, hey, can I do better than this? At each word and each phrase. If you go ahead and use the verb to get, I guarantee you can do better using some other verb. Edit to desired length. Now this is the last thing you're doing. You go through and you recite your speech at your normal cadence, adding pauses where necessary. And at that time, you either make it a little bit shorter or a little bit longer, depending on what you need. In conclusion, the final questions, you ask these 5 questions. Does my speech have a defined purpose? Does this purpose or theme weave itself through the entire speech? Is the speech written in the language or phraseology of the target audience? Are my impact words, phrases, quotes, or points situated for optimal effect? Does this speech truly educate, convince, inspire, or entertain? If it answers all of those, then you're ready for the next speech. Thank you.